admit it. There are few things in modern life more universally terrifying than the dentist's chair. You're lying flat on your back, staring up into a blinding fluorescent light, while a total stranger in a surgical mask comes at your face with a high-speed metal drill, whining at 40,000 revolutions per minute. It's stressful. It's incredibly expensive. And even with a giant needle full of Novocaine pumped directly into your gums, it is profoundly unpleasant. But I want you to imagine for just a second a very different scenario. Imagine it's the year 12,000 BC. You are a prehistoric hunter-gatherer. You are freezing, you are probably hungry, and you have a rotting, throbbing, agonizing infection deep inside your lower left molar. The pain is blinding. It feels like a tiny, angry mammoth is trying to kick its way out of your jawbone. Every time your heart beats, a fresh wave of agony shoots up into your eye and down into your neck. You don't have painkillers. You don't have antibiotics. You don't have an emergency dental clinic. You don't even have a concept of what a germ actually is. So, what exactly do you do? How did our ancient ancestors deal with a severe toothache? Did they just pull it out with a heavy rock? Did they perform ancient bloody surgery? Or did they just lie down in the dirt and accept their fate? Well, the answer is a combination of all three, and it involves some of the most brutal, hardcore, and surprisingly ingenious medical procedures in human history. But before we look at the horrifying prehistoric surgeries, we have to address the giant, mammoth-sized elephant in the room, a biological secret that most people have absolutely no idea about. And that secret is the great dental paradox. Here is a mind-blowing fact that goes completely against everything you've been taught to believe about cavemen. If you were to take a time machine back 15,000 years and look inside the mouth of the average hunter-gatherer, you would not see a rotting yellow nightmare. In fact, you would see a set of teeth that were significantly straighter, stronger, and healthier than yours are right now. I'm entirely serious. Ancient humans possessed Hollywood-level smiles. They rarely had overbites. They didn't have underbites, and almost none of them had crooked teeth. But wait, how is that biologically possible? How could a guy named Grug, who literally wipes his nose with a piece of moss and has never seen a toothbrush in his life, have better dental alignment than a modern human who spends $5,000 on Invisalign? The answer comes down to a medical concept known as Wolff's Law. Wolff's Law is a theory that states your bones will adapt and grow based on the physical stress placed upon them. If you lift heavy weights, your arm bones actually get denser. If you are a tennis player, the bones in your serving arm literally become thicker than the bones in your other arm. And the exact same rule applies to your face. Ancient humans ate a diet that was incredibly tough. They chewed on raw tubers, thick fibrous roots, unpeeled nuts, and incredibly dense, chewy, wild game meat. Eating a single meal back then was a brutal jaw workout. It required immense mechanical force. And because these ancient kids were aggressively chewing tough food, from the moment they had their baby teeth, their jawbones were constantly under stress. Because of that stress, their jawbones grew wider, longer, and thicker. Because their jaws grew so massive, there was plenty of room for all their teeth to grow in perfectly straight. Even their wisdom teeth, those annoying molars in the very back of your mouth that modern dentists have to surgically extract, fit perfectly into a caveman's mouth without crowding the other teeth. Compare that to us. Today, our food is aggressively soft. We eat pureed baby food, applesauce, soft bread, boiled pasta, and liquid smoothies. We barely have to chew our food anymore. We just sort of mash it around with our tongues and swallow. Because we don't put any mechanical stress on our jaws during childhood, our modern jawbones do not grow to their full genetic potential. Our jaws literally remain undersized. But our bodies are still genetically programmed to produce the exact same number of teeth as a caveman. So, you have 32 massive teeth trying to cram themselves into a tiny, underdeveloped modern jawbone. The result? Crooked teeth, overlapping incisors, and painfully impacted wisdom teeth. So, point one for the cavemen. Their teeth grew in perfectly straight. But what about cavities? Without minty toothpaste and fluoridated water, weren't their mouths just a breeding ground for rot and decay? Actually, no. For the vast majority of human history, cavities were incredibly rare. If you look at the fossilized skulls of early hunter-gatherers, the rate of dental decay is shockingly low. We're talking less than 2% of all teeth found, showing any signs of a cavity. But then, About 10 to 12,000 years ago, humans made a decision that completely ruined our mouths forever. We invented farming. The agricultural revolution changed everything. Instead of hunting and foraging for tough meats and wild plants, humans started settling down and growing crops. Specifically, grains. Wheat, barley, corn, and rice. For the first time in planetary history, the human diet was absolutely flooded with carbohydrates. Now, to your mouth, a carbohydrate is basically just a complex sugar, and when you chew a piece of primitive bread or a bowl of grain mush, those starchy carbs break down and coat your teeth in a thick, sticky film. This was the absolute best day ever for a specific type of bacteria living in the human mouth called Streptococcus mutans. These bacteria feed on sugars and carbohydrates. And when they eat those carbs, they excrete lactic acid. They literally poop acid directly onto your teeth. This acid breaks down the protective enamel on the outside of the tooth, boring a microscopic hole directly into the softer, sensitive layer underneath, called the dentin. This is a cavity. Before farming, humans barely ate any sugar or carbs. Honey and seasonal berries were incredibly rare treats. But once we started eating grain and bread every single day, our mouths became acid-producing factories. The rate of cavities skyrocketed globally. Human mouths became rotting, infected war zones. And remember, there are no trained dentists yet. There is no such thing as an extraction clinic. So, when a cavity burrowed deep enough into the tooth to reach the pulp, which is the bundle of incredibly sensitive nerves and blood vessels at the very center of the tooth, the pain was unimaginable. It was the kind of pain that drives a person completely insane. It prevents you from eating. It prevents you from sleeping. Your face swells up, your jaw throbs, and you become a massive liability to your tribe. And eventually, if left untreated, the infection would form an abscess. This is a massive pocket of toxic pus inside the jawbone itself. If that abscess ruptured and the bacteria entered the bloodstream, it would cause sepsis. Yes, in the Stone Age, a simple cavity from eating too much bread could literally kill you. And it did kill people. We have found ancient skulls with massive holes eaten completely through the jawbone from unchecked dental infections. So, what happened when an ancient human got a severe toothache? How far would they go to stop the pain? Well, before they resorted to extreme bloody measures, they actually had some surprisingly effective prehistoric painkillers. Ancient humans were master botanists. They had an incredibly deep understanding of their local plant life, and they knew exactly which plants to look for when they were in agony. If a caveman had a throbbing tooth, one of the first things they might do is seek out a willow tree. They would strip the bark off the tree and aggressively chew on it. This wasn't just a superstitious ritual. Willow bark contains a chemical called salicin. When salicin enters the human body, it converts into salicylic acid. If that sounds familiar, it's because salicylic acid is the exact same active chemical ingredient found in modern-day aspirin. Ancient humans were literally chewing naturally occurring aspirin to bring down the swelling and numb the pain of a rotting tooth. In other parts of the world, ancient humans would chew on the leaves of the spilanthes plant or use the numbing sap of specific weeds that acted as a mild, natural anesthetic. They would create thick mud poultices mixed with medicinal herbs and pack them directly against their swollen cheeks. But herbal aspirin can only do so much. If the tooth was fully infected and the nerve was dying, chewing on tree bark wasn't going to save you. The rot had to be removed. And that brings us to the terrifying reality of prehistoric surgery. In the year 2015, archaeologists made a horrifying and fascinating discovery in a rock shelter in northern Italy. They found the 14,000-year-old skeleton of a young man, known to scientists as the Villabruna 1-inch specimen. When researchers examined his skull, they found a severe, massive cavity in one of his lower molars. But when they put this specific tooth under an electron microscope, they noticed something completely bizarre. The cavity hadn't just naturally rotted away. The inside of the infected tooth was covered in tiny, horizontal, V-shaped scratches. These were cut marks. Deliberate, mechanical cut marks. 14,000 years ago, this young hunter-gatherer had an infected cavity that was causing him so much agony, he decided he couldn't take it anymore. So, he went to a member of his tribe and that tribe member took a microlith, which is a tiny razor-sharp piece of flint rock, and used it as a primitive dental drill. Try to wrap your head around that for a second. Imagine having an exposed, highly infected nerve in your mouth. Now imagine a prehistoric shaman taking a jagged piece of rock and aggressively scraping, gouging, and digging the rotting tissue out of the center of your tooth. There was no numbing gel. There was no laughing gas. Just you, the cold dirt floor of a cave, some tribe members holding your arms down, and a sharp rock digging into the most sensitive nerve in your entire body. But here is the craziest part of the Villabruna discovery. It actually worked. The archaeologists found that the bone around the tooth had begun to heal. The procedure successfully removed the infected tissue, stopped the rot from spreading to his bloodstream, and saved the man's life. He survived the worst dental appointment in human history. But gouging out a cavity with a rock leaves a giant, gaping hole in your tooth. And an open hole is just going to get filled with more food and bacteria, right? Well, ancient humans figured that out too. And they actually invented the world's first dental fillings. In a cave in Slovenia, researchers found a 6,500-year-old human jawbone. One of the canine teeth had a deep, painful vertical crack down the side, exposing the sensitive dentin. But the crack wasn't empty. It was packed completely full of beeswax. This wasn't an accident. This was a deliberate, highly calculated medical procedure. Ancient humans realized that chewing on pure beeswax was the perfect way to seal a damaged tooth. And from a modern biological standpoint, this is actually pure genius. Beeswax doesn't just physically block food and cold air from hitting the exposed nerve, stopping the pain. Beeswax contains a compound called propolis. Propolis is a sticky resin that bees use to build and protect their hives, and it contains incredibly powerful, naturally occurring antibacterial and anti-inflammatory properties. By packing his broken tooth with beeswax, this ancient human was essentially applying a prehistoric antibiotic filling. It sealed the tooth, killed the bacteria, and reduced the swelling. It's exactly what a modern dentist does today with composite resin, just 6,000 years earlier, and with a lot more bee stings to acquire the materials. So, we know they had primitive flint drills and antibiotic beeswax fillings. But surprisingly, cavities weren't actually the biggest threat to an ancient human's mouth. There was something much, much worse. You see, ancient humans didn't just use their teeth for smiling and chewing. To a hunter-gatherer, your mouth was essentially your third hand. It was your multi-tool. It was your pliers, your vice grip, and your scissors all rolled into one. When a prehistoric human needed to tan a tough animal hide to make winter clothing, they didn't have heavy machinery or chemical softeners. They would grip the dirty, gritty, tough animal leather between their front teeth and pull with all their body weight to stretch it out. When they needed to weave tough plant fibers to make baskets or ropes, they stripped the bark using their incisors. When they needed to soften animal sinew to use as bowstrings or fishing lines, they chewed on it for hours at a time. And remember, absolutely nothing was clean back then. Every piece of meat, every root, and every animal hide was covered in dirt, sand, and abrasive ash from the campfire. Over a lifetime, chewing on dirt and using your mouth as a pair of heavy-duty pliers acted like industrial sandpaper. This caused severe, catastrophic tooth wear. Anthropologists constantly find adult Neanderthal and early human skulls where the teeth have literally been worn completely flat. The beautiful white enamel is entirely gone, ground down all the way to the root. This extreme mechanical wear would eventually expose the pulp cavity. Once the pulp was exposed to the open air and the dirt, the tooth was dead. The infection would set in immediately. At that point, no amount of beeswax or flint scraping was going to save you. The tooth was completely compromised. The only option left to save your life was a full extraction. We don't have a lot of hard fossil evidence on exactly how ancient humans pulled teeth, because, well, pulled teeth are completely missing from the fossil record by definition. But based on indigenous tribes recorded in more recent history, prehistoric extraction was likely a violent team effort. It usually involved a piece of incredibly strong animal sinew tied tightly around the base of the rotting tooth. The other end of the sinew would be attached to a heavy rock or held by a strong member of the tribe, followed by a sharp, sudden yank. Or, if the tooth was too brittle and broken to tie a string around, They had to get creative. A fellow tribe member would place a piece of hard bone or a sturdy wooden peg against the base of the tooth. Then, using a heavy rock as a hammer, they would strike the peg, literally chiseling and smashing the tooth out of the jawbone. It was violent. It was incredibly bloody, and the recovery process consisted of spitting out the bone fragments, swishing some cold river water around in your mouth, and getting back to hunting mammoths before you starved to death. Now, hearing all of this, you might be wondering, did they ever actually try to clean their teeth? Did the concept of oral hygiene even exist to a caveman? Surprisingly, yes. Ancient humans didn't just let their teeth rot without a fight. They actively tried to keep their mouths clean. In fact, the oldest known habit of human hygiene isn't washing our hands or bathing in rivers. It's picking our teeth. Scientists have found Neanderthal teeth dating back over 130,000 years that feature very distinct, repetitive grooves worn into the sides of the molars. These grooves match perfectly with the repeated, lifetime use of toothpicks. After a meal of tough, stringy game meat, Neanderthals would use stiff blades of grass, small twigs, or splinters of animal bone to aggressively dig the meat out from between their teeth to prevent it from rotting. But they didn't stop at just toothpicks. They also invented the very first toothbrushes. Many ancient cultures utilized what anthropologists call chewing sticks. They would find a specific type of twig, often from a tree with naturally occurring antibacterial sap, like the Salvadora persica tree, also known as the toothbrush tree. They would gnaw on one end of the twig until the wood fibers frayed and separated, creating a primitive, bristly brush. They would then use this frayed end to physically scrub the plaque, food, and campfire ash off their teeth. It didn't taste like cool peppermint, and it definitely didn't have fluoride in it, but it actually worked remarkably well to physically disrupt the bacteria trying to destroy their enamel. So, the next time you find yourself sitting in the dentist's waiting room, flipping through an old magazine and dreading the sound of that high-speed drill, just take a deep breath and think about your ancestors. Think about the guy in the freezing Italian cave, lying in the dirt, paying a shaman to gouge out his infected nerve with a jagged piece of flint. Think about the guy trying to heal his cracked canine with a lump of angry beeswax. Your modern dentist might be expensive, and they might ask you too many questions while their hands are entirely inside your mouth. But at least they have Novocaine. And at least they aren't going to pull your molar out with a piece of animal string and a heavy rock. If you made it this far, you clearly have a morbid curiosity for how brutal history really was. Do me a huge favor and hit that subscribe button right now. It helps the channel out a ton, and I've got a lot more prehistoric survival secrets coming your way very soon. Until next time, keep brushing your teeth, and whatever you do, stay away from the flint rocks.